The New Orleans Saints, man, they're also a team that has some pretty high expectations. This was a franchise last year that moved on from Sean Payton. Well, they had to move on from Sean Payton because he ended up retiring. And Dennis Allen, in his first season as the head coach for the Saints, he kind of disappointed. Yeah, they had some significant injuries. Michael Thomas, once again, wasn't able to stay healthy. They had some injuries on the offensive line that forced them to have to move some guys around. But when you look at how weak the NFC South was last year, there was no reason why the New Orleans Saints shouldn't have missed out on the playoffs. I mean, Tom Brady was on his last leg. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense was a disaster. Todd Bowles proved to everybody why he's not head coach material. And going into this year, you have Derek Carr at quarterback. So you move on from Andy Dalton. You bring back Jameis Winston to be the backup. Derek Carr may not be considered an elite quarterback in a lot of people's eyes, but he's way better than what the Saints had at quarterback last year. And you probably could say that Pete Carmichael and this Saints coaching staff severely mismanaged New Orleans quarterback situation last year. Andy Dalton was too inconsistent with taking care of the football. He also had a tendency to hold on to the football too long. And Jameis Winston, even when he was healthy, the guy still was a turnover machine, just like how he was when he was back playing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you got Derek Carr, somebody who should give you pretty consistent quarterback play, somebody who should take pretty good care of the football. And the team that you have around Derek Carr is probably the best supporting cast that he's had in his whole entire NFL career. You're throwing to Chris Olave, who was the second best rookie wideout last year, behind Garrett Wilson. You got Rashid Shaheed, who also had a really good rookie year. Michael Thomas. I mean, hopefully this guy can stay healthy. I mean, this guy hasn't had a full healthy season since his all-pro year back in 2019. And I think for Michael Thomas, there's only so many years that you can keep on getting injured. I think eventually you have to be able to stay healthy for a good length of the year. Even if the Saints aren't able to get Michael Thomas playing in all 17 games, you pray to God that he can at least play for a good stretch of the season, at least 11 to 12 games. That's all you're asking for if you're a Saints fan. Like, Jesus, man, like Michael Thomas, can you please stay healthy? Please. With Michael Thomas on the field, New Orleans has one of the best receiving corps in the NFL. Now, we don't know what's going on with Alvin Kamara and his legal situation. I was reading a couple of reports earlier today, and his legal situation right now doesn't look all that good. There's a high possibility that Alvin Kamara misses a couple of games this year for the Saints, but they did pay Jamal Williams a good amount of money in free agency. Plus, you have Kendre Miller, rookie running back who you drafted out of TCU. I think your run game is going to be fine. Your main concern is going to be the offensive line. Now, this offensive line, they underperformed last year. They dealt with some injuries. They had to move some guys around. But with everybody coming back fully healthy, there's no reason why this offensive line should perform the way that it did last year. And Pete Carmichael, as a play caller, he doesn't look like he was all that great prior to when Sean Payton was on the coaching staff. When Sean Payton was on the coaching staff, this man, Pete Carmichael, he looked like the next great play caller at OC for New Orleans. And then Sean Payton ends up retiring, and Pete Carmichael kind of forgets how to call plays and how to properly run the offense. Like, I don't know what the hell went on with the Saints offense last year. Injuries aside, this team severely underperformed. And this year, with everything that they bring in, you bring in Derek Carr, you're still going to have an elite defense. This defense last year carried New Orleans on his back for pretty much the whole entire year. And then you had Andy Dalton turning the football over at a pretty high rate. You didn't want to start Jameis Winston, although he was the better option. So this offense didn't help this defense out at all. And this defense, although in my opinion this was an elite unit, they struggled at times getting off the field on third down and at forcing takeaways. This was one of the teams in the NFL that struggled to produce turnovers. Not just that, but against the run, they were pretty average. But they do have a really good pass rush. They have one of the most talented secondaries in the NFL. You got Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson the D-boy at cornerback, Marcus May and the Honey Badger manning your safety spots this year. And in this division, you're going to be having the best QB in the NFC South. Tampa Bay is either going to be starting Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. Have you not seen what they've been doing so far throughout OTAs for Tampa Bay? It's been god-awful. They overthrowing wide-open receivers, and they're running routes on air. And then you have Carolina, who could be a little interesting with Bryce Young and Frank Wright. They did make a lot of improvements over the course of this offseason with the moves that they made in free agency and how well they drafted. But with a rookie quarterback, despite how great Bryce Young may be, there's always going to be some growing pains with that. And then, for the Atlanta Falcons, do you really trust Desmond Ridder? I mean, Falcons fans make it seem like Desmond Ridder is just destined to improve. And last year when we saw Desmond Ridder play, the dude didn't really have any flashes or any big moments that made you say, oh yeah, Desmond Ridder is going to be our guy to lead us to the promised land. If you're New Orleans, this is probably the best chance you're going to have at winning the NFC South. And to be honest with you, there's no reason why New Orleans shouldn't win this division. This season falls on the shoulders mostly of Dennis Allen. The talent's there. Hopefully everybody can stay healthy on the offensive line. The defense, is still going to be really good. Takeaways is something that you can't really practice and you can't really control. Some years you're going to have a lot of takeaways. Other years you're not going to have too many. But overall, when you're looking at this team from a talent standpoint, this without a doubt is the most talented roster in the NFC South. I mean, you're loaded at receiver. Even if Michael Thomas ends up going down, you're not too bad because you still do have Olave and Shaheed. And you're going to have the best QB in this division and Derek Carr. So there's no reason why the New Orleans Saints shouldn't make it to the postseason. Dennis Allen is going into a year where it's playoff or bust. When Sean Payton retired and Dennis Allen ended up becoming the head coach of New Orleans, they retained basically the whole entire coaching staff. This is pretty much the same group of guys that Dennis Allen has that was with Sean Payton throughout his whole entire tenure as the head coach when he was in the NOLA. So for Dennis Allen, man, if the Saints can't make it to the postseason this year, like Kevin Stefanski, this is going to be an indication that he's not head coach material. And Dennis Allen doesn't even have a winning record as a head coach. I was really surprised when Dennis Allen was announced the head coach of the Saints. But Sean Payton, when he went on The Herd with Colin Cowherd, he said that Dennis Allen, he still believes in him. He feels like the way that last year went was mostly due to injuries. So I'm going to put my faith in Sean Payton and believe that Dennis Allen is going to be able to get this thing turned around. But a lot of issues that the Saints kind of had were kind of on the coaching staff. Mismanaging the quarterback situation. There's no reason why you should be having Andy Dalton out there. You should have went with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston was the guy who probably gave you the best chance to win. Plus, this is the younger option at QB. Andy Dalton is more of a backup option at this point. And even when Andy Dalton was in the game, he wasn't no better than Jameis Winston. He was still throwing pick sixes and throwing interceptions. So what really was the difference between Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston? And moving on to this year, if you are somebody who is a doubter of the New Orleans Saints, and let's say you're a Falcons, Panthers, or Bucks fan, and you're looking to play devil's advocate for why New Orleans can't win this division, you're probably going to say, well, Derek Carr, you saw how last year went with the Las Vegas Raiders. How do you know if that's just not the quarterback that Derek Carr is now, despite having a better supporting cast? Then you do have a pretty fair argument. Like I mentioned earlier at the start of this segment, Derek Carr isn't known to be a top 10 quarterback. And even though he can give you elite quarterback play at times, is not consistent, and plus in big games he doesn't really come through all too often. Last year he wasn't really in a good system with Josh McDaniels. Him and Josh McDaniels just weren't a good fit. But at the end of the day, though, Derek Carr has not really proven to be a quarterback that can elevate a team. Derek Carr has to have a good supporting cast around him in order for him to be effective. And if the New Orleans Saints have to battle through injuries this year on the offensive line and that receiver like how they did last year, Derek Carr potentially could struggle. They also paid Derek Carr a pretty hefty contract. And I was just a little bit surprised at how much Derek Carr was making. I know that the quarterback market is getting oversaturated and these QB contracts just seem to get bigger and bigger. You got guys like Daniel Jones making big money and Derek Carr making big money, and these guys aren't even considered to be elite QBs. So for Derek Carr, if things aren't going right and the play calling isn't good and guys can't stay healthy up front, New Orleans could end up struggling this year. But for the most part, if I had to bet my money on the Saints making it to the postseason, I have a lot of confidence that they would be able to do so. I was talking to a Saints fan in the barbershop a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that he believes that this team is good enough to not only make it to the playoffs, but maybe win a playoff game or two. And I said, whoa, like, I think you're drinking a little bit too much of the Kool-Aid, but this team most definitely does have enough talent to not only win this division, but to make it to the postseason and maybe win a wild card game. But there's also a strong possibility that this team disappoints. Dennis Allen, once again, doesn't have a winning record as a head coach, and he hasn't proven that he knows how to coach a winning football team. There were times last season when this team looked undisciplined. They looked like they were getting out-coached at times. And you can put it all on the quarterback position and the injuries on the offensive line all you want to, but you were playing in the worst division in the NFL in the NFC South. New Orleans going into last year kind of was my pick to maybe win this division potentially outside of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I had the Saints making it into the postseason. I think I had them at 9-10 wins. So last year for them to only win 7 games was a major disappointment despite the injuries. I mean, if Carolina could win 7 games and almost win this division with an interim head coach and with Sam Darnold at QB, you mean to tell me that New Orleans couldn't have did the same with Dennis Allen having a somewhat better roster than what Carolina had last season? 2023, is playoffs or bust for Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints organization. If New Orleans doesn't make it to the postseason this year, if you're general manager Mickey Loomis, you're going to have to sit Dennis Allen aside after the year is over, and you're going to have some tough conversations. And those tough conversations may end up in Mickey Loomis having to give Dennis Allen the pink slip. Dennis Allen is a head coach who hasn't proven to know how to coach a winning football team. He had a losing record when he was the head coach of the Oakland Raiders, and he still has a losing record with the New Orleans Saints. And yes, this is a way better situation than he ever had with the Oakland Raiders, but there were times last year where this team just let games get away from them at times. And this coaching staff, without Sean Payton, they kind of forgot how to be good coaches. I was thinking that Pete Carmichael was going to be one of the best OCs in the NFL last year. And at times, the dude didn't look all that good calling the plays. So this season is a big year for the New Orleans Saints. Dennis Allen has to prove that he can get this team to the postseason. And he has to be able to prove that he can coach a winning football team. There's no excuses anymore. You got a proven QB in Derek Carr, who's solid at best. He can give you good top 11, top 12 QB play, but he's the best QB in this division. I know that's not saying much because this is the NFC South and there's not really any other good QBs in this division that can even come close to saying that they're as good as Derek Carr, at least at this moment. So for New Orleans, when you have the best quarterback in the division, that gives you a huge advantage. Not just that, but your defense is still going to be really stout. Your only concern, if you're a Saints fan, has to be Dennis Allen as your head coach. How much belief do you have in Dennis Allen being able to get the Saints into the playoffs in 2023? If this team isn't playing in the postseason, I think you're going to have to look at Dennis Allen if you're Mickey Loomis, and you're going to have to shake his hand. You're going to have to say, we appreciate everything that you've done for this organization, but we got to move on.